Hello, everyone, and welcome to TAG Tech Talks. I'm Larry Williams, President and CEO of TAG. I'm pleased to bring you another edition of this podcast featuring our technology community's best and brightest leaders. The podcast is all about showcasing what makes Georgia the #1 place to do business, and it's about bringing to you the stories of how our technology community and our remarkable TAG members are driving innovation, benefiting our local technology community, and making a global impact. Today, I'm joined by Scott Dufour, Global CIO at FLEETCOR. FLEETCOR is a leader in fintech and business payments. Scott has had a stellar career in technology and information services in important industries, including pharmaceutical, healthcare, and now global payments and fintech. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Larry. Glad to be here.
Great. We really want to talk about your journey, Scott, in information services and technology and innovation. Learn a lot about what you've learned in leadership and some of the things that motivate you. And then we'll take a breath and we'll go on to talk more about the business drivers, technology trends, and things that influence your business. And I think a lot of the mega trends that are influencing a lot of businesses. Sound good?
Sounds like a good plan.
Well, good. Well, why don't you start with telling us about your role at FLEETCOR and given your career journey, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so thanks, Larry. My current role at FLEETCOR here is I'm Global CIO. We operate obviously here in the US and in Brazil and Europe and Russia and Australia and New Zealand. So a lot of different geographies. We've grown through acquisition. So we did start here in the US and grew through acquisition. And my current role, I've been here at FLEETCOR for just about 18 months. And as you mentioned, prior to FLEETCOR, I was at McKesson, which was in pharmaceutical distribution. And talking a little bit about my journey was interesting. I didn't set out to work in IT, right? I was an electrical engineer and studying chip design. So I got into computers because we were using them to design chips. And really that kind of pointed me to a passion I had, which was in programming and systems and seeing what they could do. And as I came out of college and had choices of what to do, I had selected to start in information technology. Back then it was with Anderson Consulting, which was Accenture, and found a passion for it, right? So I guess that's part of the journey of going to college is to find your passion, and I was able to do that. And really from there, I spent time probably in the traditional sense doing projects and programming and growing up the ranks. And then came our infamous .com bubble, which probably was my first foray more into information technology as a business, right? Away from just supporting back-end systems, and actually took several different roles from leading technology and product management to actually controlling a P&L, which I'd never done. I'd gotten my MBA at University of Chicago, so I was able to leverage that and moved over to the business side, which I guess really helped me focus on, IT as a product, right? And not just technology for the sake of technology, but really focusing on how technology influences business. And I'd say my one big takeaway from the whole .com area as I worked for, independent startup companies was adoption and change management, all right? Getting companies to change the way they do things was our biggest barrier. We thought it was how quickly we could build products and how quickly we could innovate. And you really learn the human element, and change management ends up being a large part of what inhibits innovation, right? And getting people to change. And so that was a great learning I had from my, it was almost probably 7+ years in startup companies, at which point I got back on, I guess, what people would consider more of a traditional IT CIO career path, holding different levels of senior management positions at Ingram Micro, which was high-tech distribution. And I'd say, and then on to McKesson during those years, as I got into senior management, that's like the other inflection point in my career. And you mentioned the word leadership was early on, you're very proud of the things that you're able to accomplish, whether it was programming, things that you did, problems you solved, small teams that you led. And as you got further up the chain, you realized the power of the team, and your job was really about developing the people below you. and you start to get more, say I started personally to get more pride out of seeing people develop as opposed to my own personal accomplishments. And maybe those were my personal accomplishments. I just didn't realize it, which is watching the folks below me succeed and grow and develop, and you become more of a coach. And those were some of the best compliments I had from some of my people was, I really enjoyed the coaching you gave me, right? And the development and getting those notes from folks and people, and then watching their careers flourish. Sometimes outside of the company that I was with, they moved on or what have you, but that was pretty neat. And then, as I come here to FLEETCOR, I'm really able to combine a lot of those learnings, right? The neat thing about FLEETCOR and being global CIO here is the services and products we own to we deliver to our customers is the IT. It's what we do, right? We're not supporting back office processes, but we're developing products that drive revenue for the company and drive value for our customers. And so that's for an IT guy, there can't be a better place. And so that's great. And we're doing it on a global, large scale, certainly larger than I was doing at my startup. So I'm kind of able to combine some of my big company experience and working on, big complex systems and problems, along with some of the innovation I learned and entrepreneurial spirit I gained working at startup companies, and able to combine those here at FLEETCOR, which is fun.
That's really a great story, and it talks about the multidimensionality that you have, and I think that a lot of leaders have. So that experience in the startup world, being able to work with large corporations. I'm going to go into a kind of a two-part question that's related to this, because a lot of people have talked about senior executives. Is many of them did start out their career in an Anderson or something similar to that. And they've attributed a lot of that training as really being able to help them frame up multidimensional, unstructured problems in a much more methodical way. And so I wanted to learn a little bit more. Did that experience, do you think, really help you throughout your career? And then the second part of the question is, let's get it into contemporary terms. And you talk about an inflection point. COVID-19 has been an inflection point, to say the least, for all of us in all businesses. So how is that leadership and that experience, have you been able to take and leverage that as we manage through a COVID-19 scenario?
Good. Now I'll try to, if I forget the second question, you'll have to remind me.
I'll remind you. Okay.
Yeah, in the first question, it's interesting when you look at consulting. Certainly they ingrain you in process. And they rely on process to deal with an inflection of a large thousands and thousands of people they were hiring every year, at least back when I was, the model back then was to hire a lot of undergrads. And they certainly targeted engineers and people with technical backgrounds, regardless if they had computer science background, just because quite frankly, I'm so old that back in 1990, we weren't churning out as many computer science graduates, right? You had electrical engineers and mechanical engineers, and they're like that. And so I'd say, the focus on process and the ability that process allows you to control quality and allows you to stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish certainly has benefited me in my career. I would say equally as much as just my technical background in electrical engineering and the ability to troubleshoot and problem solve, right? To your point, not to get overwhelmed by your data points, to make sure you're looking at data points, to make sure you're looking at a problem. I always remember an analogy I had from one professor, and I wish I could give him credit, but I don't remember. But he says, make sure you look at a problem, think of a problem as a house. And if you only look at a house through one window, you only get one perspective on the room. You need to walk all the way around it and look through every window to truly understand the layout of that house, right? So, having those perspectives in IT, whether you're, troubleshooting production systems or you're about to design, a new process or new program, and thinking of it from multiple dimensions is critical to success. So I'd say those are the two things I kind of took out, from my background and applied, throughout my career as I look at solving complex IT problems. So I think that addresses your first question. When I think of the second question, COVID-19, and I was on the CIO, CMO panel with you guys a little bit back where we talked about the interrelationship between the marketing group and the technology teams. And the flow of that is, no one had BCP plans for shutting down every location, right? You had plans to do different things. And so, immediately the problem can become very overwhelming because you can't pick up your playbook and go execute, right? So you get into problem solving. And I think the key things when I looked at my team and who shined, and we had several people truly shine in terms of their execution during this time period. It was traditionally more the problem solvers, some of our operations folks. Certainly, we included security and our architecture folks to help us in some of the complex things that we had to, set up very quickly. But breaking the problem down into solvable parts, breaking it down into and prioritizing, quite frankly, which things we need to get done, and helping our business partners, do that as well. I'd say those were some of the things that really benefited us. And I think just having that very, I'd say, methodical and pragmatic approach to looking at the problem without getting overwhelmed by the overall task, which was we had to get thousands of people on a global basis working from home in the span of 7 to 10 days. Right? If someone had given us that problem, at the beginning of the year, we probably would have told them, geez, we need a 6-month long project that's going to cost multi-million dollars to design all these great processes and technology. And we did it in 7 to 10 days with, I think our total bill, I don't remember the total bill, but it certainly wasn't multi-million dollars. So I think those are the things I took away from that experience when we went through it in terms of how my people executed.
That's great, and that's a wonderful experience and great ways to apply it. Just building on this, and you mentioned now that one of your great joys is to, watch your people grow, watch your people take on more responsibilities and be successful. And I think, sounds like, you're the coach, but it sounds like you're a bit of a player coach as well. And so get things done. But so what are you doing now? And how are you maintaining and building an innovation and technology culture at FLEETCOR? And, it's a challenge, and I guess, it was challenging pre-COVID, and it's got to be a challenge now. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah, it's specific to COVID or just in general?
I think in general, and then you can talk about the COVID overlay.
Part of it's always going to be a little bit different in terms of, what's a canvas you're starting with, right? So when I came into FLEETCOR, it was a company that had grown through acquisition. They'd been through a couple different IT reorganizations and outsourcing. And, the first thing I did was I sat down with all of our line of business presidents and understand we're structured in a federated model, right? We're federated by essentially line of business presidents that are responsible for their P&Ls and responsible for their products and their service offerings to their customers. So I wanted to get a lay of land there. And what I found, first of all, is, IT had really moved into still operating in a more traditional IT, let's say, project mindset. When you looked how IT was organized, it was organized around IT disciplines. And it was organized, they tried to organize globally or centrally across multiple lines of businesses. So, the first thing, and then as I talk to the presidents, we don't get what we want when we need it. It's difficult to engage with IT. A lot of the normal things you would hear that you'd say, well, just implement Agile. And it wasn't just about implementing Agile. We had to change how we engaged. And so one of my early mantras was, we're going to move from a project to a product mindset. Right, and I use that as a basis for driving some reorganization to better align our IT organization with our lines of businesses. And then even within a line of business, they have product offerings and product managers, and we aligned our IT groups with them. That really helped our engagement, and we got terrific feedback, terrific engagement, better prioritization of the portfolio of work we had to do. And so in the first year, that was very powerful for us. One, to regaining the trust of our business partners. And two, quite frankly, just getting more intimate with our business and understanding and having our people develop expertise relative to certain lines of business and the products that they offer. I believe to drive innovation, context and intimacy with your customer and with your products is essential. Right? You don't start with technology, right? technology is a tool that's going to help you get there, but unless you understand what problems we're trying to solve, what customer problems we're trying to solve, business problems, it's going to be difficult to innovate. So that was critical. And now as we transition into my second year and we start to look, the problems we're facing, we've solved kind of the engagement with our business. We're starting to get better at delivering our projects and products. I shouldn't say projects, our products, right? Sticking with my mantra, in a much more timely fashion, in a higher quality fashion that better meets customer needs. We're now starting to say, what are our challenges? And our challenges are we deal with legacy technology and we still don't innovate quick enough, right? If I ask our business partners, I still want it quicker. I'm not sure I'll ever get a different answer, to the day I retire. If I ask, they always want it quicker. So now we're going down the path of great. We need to, although we have some semblance of agile in places, we're trying to drive agile, but we're doing that in partnership with our business, right? Because quite frankly, to be successful in that agile journey, we need them to take an active role in the product management discipline. And so we're driving that, right? Through tools, through training and the like, and starting to have some real good success with that. And I'd say the other thing we stood up, we brought in introduced the concept of really enterprise architecture to start to drive a modernization and innovation roadmap for each of our products, and really doing that. And we've got a lot of core, I'll call it transactional legacy systems. And I'd say in the past, the company, when you would have said innovation, they would have thought it was about replacing that core transactional system, right? Much like if you have an SAP or an old ERP, I got to put in a new ERP. I have an old system here, I've got to, replace it and build everything new. And I'd say one of the things we're doing differently is really taking an outside-in approach. And what I mean by that is we're focusing initially on our customer experience and digital layer, right? And having good success with that. And doing that by putting in new framework and architecture for our, what we call our unified customer experience. And then we're supporting that with a API foundation, right? To interact with our legacy systems. And that's providing us a lot of flexibility and helping us drive some of that speed and agility on the periphery where, quite frankly, a lot of the demand from our customers and a lot of the innovation that's going on in the fintech industry, it's going on at the periphery in terms of how our customers interact with us and what they want to do. And so that's been very helpful there to be able to meet business needs. And then over time, we're going to slowly but surely, through the use of services, start to modernize the back end transactional systems by carving out some of the common, I'll call it common features, common functionality, and starting to put that into a modern framework. And we can do that over time. And the great thing about that is we can accelerate or decelerate as quickly as we need to based on, the changing COVID environment. So if I've been running a huge, big, multi-million-dollar, multi-year project during COVID, that would have been a problem, right? We needed to quickly contain costs. The fortunate thing with the way we were approaching it in incremental fashion is we could slow down for a few months till we understand our landscape and understand how our business is going to change. And once we have a better understanding of what our financials are going to look like, we can hit the accelerator again. So that's one of the advantages to our approach as well.
Now, I'll take it that when you were in college, you were still post punch cards. They weren't.
We were post punch cards. Yes.
Okay, that's good. It's interesting what you were saying because I often say that technology are tools to innovate. And so the way that you frame that technology is the tool. So let's frame up the problem. And as you said, let's assess the problem, the house analogy, let's make sure we understand it. All makes sense. And you sort of touched on this, but, the role of the CIO has evolved as well. I think traditionally you might still feel this way is like every problem is a technology problem. And if it fails, it's the CIO's fault. And if it succeeds, it's somebody else's success. But now the CIO really is being brought into the business side of things, and that you've got to be a part of the business plan. What's driving revenue? What's saving money on the expense lines? What's really driving efficiencies? So can you talk about how the role of the CIO has changed and what it is today?
Yeah, for me, it's interesting. To to your point, they are, especially in the fintech industry and here at FLEETCOR, more and more looking at technology as our product, so that they can't keep me out of the meetings, right? I have to be there, right? So,
Right.
but we have some really great business leaders that are wanting to partner with IT. The biggest thing I've seen change. You reference back to my Anderson days when I came out of the corporate world. Moving away from here are my business requirements, go away and do it, to partnering around here's my business problem, how do you help me solve it? I'd say that's the change, right? Trying to change and move from being, it's going to sound cliche, everyone's used it, but being an order taker to being a problem solver, right? Back to our analogy around the house, and getting people to have that mindset, right? That you're a partner with the business, and stop admiring problems that you see out there, but deliver solutions, right? And the transformation we've gone through so far is, I'd say, hey, we're doing a better job partnering. We're being pulled into the discussion. Our opinions are being looked for. We're coming up with creative solutions architecturally with our technology to help accelerate some of the business ideas. That's good. I'll get really excited when all of a sudden the IT guys are bringing ideas to the business guys and they're being adopted. That's probably our next level of adoption and progress in terms of what we're doing. But certainly we've moved from order taker and we're moving into and trying to hold the valued partner title. Does that happen every day? No, we still get the days where, hey, my PC is not working. Hey, I can't do this, and I'll get those emails, and that'll drag me down. Right? That's not where I want to be engaging. That should be like electricity and working. And but for the most part, the discussions and what we've been doing have been on the how do we partner better side, which has been a real good progress here.
That's great. And just right before we wrap up this part one of this, what advice would you tell others that are seeking a role like yours? Put on your coach hat, and how would you coach the next generation of innovators and technologists?
It's obviously going to be my opinion, and it's going to be, I don't say jaded, but it's going to be shaded by my journey. And I'd say one of the things I did in my journey was, I see a lot of people chasing titles. So you say, how do I get to be CIO, right? You've got to be careful on that, right? I tried to, as I looked and developed my career, say, what do you need? What does a CIO, what skill sets, what tools they need to have in their toolbox, right? And then how, as I progress my career, do I, master those, right? So I always challenge myself as I look at my next opportunities, whether they were within a certain company or I was moving on from a different company, which was, how do I develop those skills? And quite frankly, sometimes put myself in an uncomfortable position where I'm not the expert, right? It's easy to stay in your area of expertise. It's comfortable, and to challenge yourself. And so I'd say as folks look in terms of what they want to do, if they say, hey, I want to be a CIO, you have to look, to your point, Larry, how the CIO role has evolved, right? And I look at my current role, and I'd like to say all of it was great forethought, but I look back at some of the things that have benefited me, being an entrepreneur and having to sell technology to executives. Now I look at the role of the CIO, that's great experience I got that has benefited me. So you have to think about how can I get that type of experience, right? So I'd say as people, put the roadmap to their careers, it's important to make sure, one, you're always challenging yourself. Two, you're looking at the breadth of skills and not just the depth of skills you're going to need to have for the role you want. And you know what? Not everyone has to be a CIO. I've had, I remember back, and I don't mean to get long-winded here, but my first role is, they didn't call it a CIO back then. It was a director of information systems at a company I worked for, Sun Chemical. And I remember I had a guy, I think I was in my early 30s, and my boss got cancer, pancreatic cancer, right? And had to retire or take a lower role. And they plucked me out, made me, I think at age 29, the director of IT. And I stepped over several guys who were 40s and 50s. And I remember one guy, was upset, left, but then he came back and he's like, you know what? I found out I never wanted that role. I liked doing what I was doing. So I guess my other message would be, you don't all have to be CIO, right? You got to like what you're doing. You got to get enjoyment out of it, or you won't be good at it and you won't be happy. So I think, making sure you understand, what brings what do you like about your job and what do you like doing? And when you become CIO, you have to deal with budgets, right? And if you're not an administrative person, you've got to like some level of administration, and I'm okay with that, right? I'll do it, and I'm pretty good at it. It's not necessarily what I want to do 80% of my day, right? Unfortunately, I don't have to, but it is part of the responsibility of the job, which is one of the reasons I went and got my MBA, right? Because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as an IT guy. I knew I had to be able to talk P&Ls and OpEx and CapEx, and quite frankly, understand the levers in the business and how IT impacts that. And that's one of the things I personally did. But I guess that would be my advice. A little bit of rambling there, but that would be my advice.
Well, no, I think it's good perspective, because I remember a mentor of mine told me a long time ago that as he advanced up the ranks and got promoted, it actually took him further and further away from the things he was strong at and things that he loved. And he found himself doing less and less of that and more of these other things. And he had to reconcile that, and embrace this new opportunities that he had, and he really enjoyed them. And part of it is learning the business side of it. And so I think that's in line with a lot of career paths. But I think strong people who do things, they do have a choice. And if that's not for you, then that's okay. So I think that's great. You told us a little bit about your background, but this part we really want to talk about the trends in innovation, technology, and sort of get down into, we might geek out a little bit and getting down into some of the technology, but also part of the business trends of it. So one thing that we've noticed, and you and I've talked a little bit about, is that the pandemic really did shine a light on some of the risk and some of the weaknesses that we have in our corporations and our companies. So what changes and what accelerations of technology, the adoption of digital transformation, every company's going through a digital transformation, right? But how did this help accelerate some of the things that you might have wanted to do, or industry trends within the payment industry?
Now, let me talk maybe through two different lenses. One, just introspective of us as a company. And secondly, maybe a few things we saw with our customers. I'd say us as a company was interesting. We didn't have to buy a lot of technology. We had a lot of the tools we needed to be effective, as we had to move thousands of people to a remote workforce in the span of 7 to 10 days. I think the thing that helped us, and we mentioned something about this, that change management and people are sometimes the hardest part of innovation and implementing new technologies, was it really forced the company and put the change management of our digital platform and some of our collaboration tools on steroids, right? People using it. And that included our board members, that included our customer service reps, our executives, and everyone else. And just to watch people drive through, and because they knew about the challenges of the pandemic, people didn't complain. And I'd say they persevered through some of their, learning curve issues with the new technologies, right? And you wouldn't have gotten that in a normal environment. Normal environment, you wouldn't have had the patience. Oh, this doesn't work. I'm going to revert back to what I normally do. I'm going to email out the presentation. Everyone pull it up. Everyone go do it. As opposed to, hey, we're going to get our collaboration software up and running. We're going to run this on Zoom, or we're going to run this on Skype. So that was great in terms of push that out. Obviously, we hadn't sought to scale some of our technology to having everyone remote. So we had our own challenges from an IT perspective to quickly scale up things. And my team did, quite frankly, an excellent job of that. And we were fortunate. We just gone through a network refresh in December, so we timed that well. I'd like to say I knew I did that with all forethought in mind, but I didn't. But we benefited from some good capital deployment. So I'd say internally, that was a thing as I watch, and we continue to benefit as people are still working remotely. As I look at our customers, it's interesting when you look at the fintech world and you look at digital payments. Even before COVID, we saw very fast adoption of some of the new technology in the B2C B2C space, right? Customers, you, I, everyone else, we're the first ones to get on a Venmo or a PayPal and things like that. When you get to the B2B space, the adoption is very slow. Right? There's still, people wouldn't realize how much is still going through cash and checks and everything else, and just not automated. And so we have started to see an uptick in some of the digital payments, right? And a couple of the examples would be, quite frankly, our automated accounts payable solutions, where customers had been doing things with checks and everything else, and all of a sudden they realize they don't have people in the office, or they're putting people at risk to have to go into places and everything else, that they had a gap. And so they're now talking to us about, hey, how do I outsource this and how do I automate this process? We've got certain solutions. I think I talked to you in a previous time in Brazil, where we're moving to, we use RFID tags in cars originally for tolls, but now we're using it for parking lots and fast food restaurants. And we've developed some technology to be able to pay tolls with your iPhone, so you don't have to exchange cash. So we're starting to see people accelerate and adopt in those areas, but still, I'd say it's in the B2B space of payments, there's a long way to go and a lot of opportunity there. So certainly as we start to look at our roadmaps and things that we're doing, we're keeping in mind that touchless and digital is becoming more and more part of a discussion with our customers, and should help accelerate the adoption of some of our tools and offerings.
No, that is very interesting, and especially when you say adoption, a lot of the tools were there. I know I've talked to some people in your roles that are either in the public sector and government, or even another, like in your previous healthcare, and how this has accelerated. One CIO of a city said that he's been able to drive change in the last 4 to 6 weeks that he'd been trying to do for the last 2 years. And to your point, it wasn't the tools and the technology were there. It was just a matter of the adoption. And I think in a previous conversation, you talked about things that can either inhibit innovation and technology adoption, or what enables it. And sometimes it's our own policies, or sometimes it could be internal procedures that are the inhibitors, and things that, you know, we have control of and we can do. And telemedicine's the other way. I think during COVID, we've seen people, you know, telemedicine open up, and these are adoption techniques that people was, and quite frankly, I don't see us going back. I mean, it's working and it's working well. And I don't think it's some people say it's a relaxation of policies, but I think that there's the tools and the technologies that actually can even, you know, that can meet the standards or even higher standards for privacy and security that everybody wants. Scott, one thing that's very interesting about your career is your global perspective. I mean, you work with global companies. I believe you've lived abroad, you know, working with companies. And so you've got a great perspective about that. You brought up Brazil and the RFID. A lot of times other countries outside the United States can be quicker to adopt technology to drive things. You know, Brazil, I remember, you know, Brazil was doing online banking way before we were doing it in the US. Other countries have really adopted mobile banking and others. Talk to us about that adoption and what's going on in the global marketplace, and how it might apply to the United States and the local markets as well.
Yeah, I would say I think you're spot on. You look, and I'll give a couple of just examples that are just kind of almost will seem silly to us, because we like to think of ourselves as innovators on technology in the US. But when you look at payment cards specifically, and I was talking to our CIO in Europe this week about some of the things they're starting to look at relative to cards, right? And they're getting pressured away from, hey, they've been using chip and pin for decades, right? And now they're getting pushed to, you know, tap and quickly get the tap cards out there, so people don't have to touch and put in pin codes and the like. And, you know, here in the States, our reaction during COVID is we actually pushed out the requirement for chip and pin at your pump at your gas station, because we said, well, people can't get it done because of COVID, so now we're going to push it out even further. So it's interesting to see the US is almost regressing from that perspective, and I look at Europe and other folks, and they're pushing forward and accelerating quicker. So it is interesting. Part of it's tied, you know, unfortunately, sometimes to infrastructure. Right, you just got a lot of infrastructure, and some of the companies that don't, or countries that don't have that infrastructure can innovate quicker, right? Because they're not weighed down by that legacy infrastructure, and it doesn't mean a big reinvestment in capital and replacing stuff that quote unquote works, because they don't have it, so they can start at the leading edge. So a lot of it depends on where you're starting from, And some of it depends on, quite frankly, your ability to move quicker. And, quite frankly, in the digital payment space, sometimes, at least on the B2B side, Europe has been able to move quicker than we have been here in the US.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about something that's always in the headlines, but and especially during COVID, there's been an increase in things around fraud, obviously data security, network security, and privacy as well. What have you been doing at FLEETCOR to make sure that your systems are up to speed, obviously protecting the data? And then are there any unique trends that you see in this area? As we said, the bad guys only have to be right once. We have to be right every time.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting. We, as you pushed, especially call center people out to different to their homes, right? So whether that be sales or support folks, large groups of people that we're used to having in a secure, confined space that deal with sensitive information, customer information, all of a sudden now that's all dispersed, right? That can cause your CISO to pull his hair out, right? Worry about how we can do that. Before I had cameras angling and I could monitor and everything else. But things that we did when I think of that group, it seems basic, but education and training, right? Just getting out at the forefront again about phishing, about educating certain functions that we allowed them to do when they were in a secure, confined space. You can't do anymore. You have to direct your customers to our digital platforms where they can do it themselves, just because we didn't want people handling certain information at home in an open environment that we didn't feel was safe. So there was an element that there was just a lot of education and getting people aware of things.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This is Larry Williams, President and CEO of TAG. This is our Tech Talk. I've been delighted to be with Scott Dufour, the Global CIO of FLEETCOR, talking about his career journey, leadership and innovation, and also building culture within a technology company. Thank you.